Now on 960 The Patriot, it's the Middle East Radio Forum. Your chance to talk about the turmoil in the Middle East. Questions are welcome at radioforum@aol.com. That's radioforum@aol.com. Now your host for the Middle East Radio Forum, Meir Jolovitz.
Hello and welcome to Middle East Radio Forum, the weekly program unafraid to tackle the issues of the day. Ours is the radio and internet broadcast which offers a bold and unapologetic view of Middle East affairs. At Middle East Radio Forum, we recognize and readily identify the struggle between competing civilizations, ideologies, and cultures, between Western values and those dedicated to upending them. To frame it otherwise is to be dishonest, and the greatest form of dishonesty is self-deception. My name is Meir Jolovitz. I'm pleased to co-host the show with attorney William Wolf, where we're normally featured on alternate Sundays. Today is June 12th, 2022. This program can be heard live anywhere in the world on our website, www.middleeastradioforum.com, or at www.960thepatriot.com. Also, a reminder, this broadcast can be heard again when it's repeated on Saturday night at 9 p.m. And now, to the troubled Middle East. Today, in a few minutes, our guest, Dr. Melissa Jane Kronfeld, deconstructs the myths about the struggle over the Temple Mount and addresses Israel's misbegotten policy of appeasement. The topic, Israel's disconnect from reality, a bold and iconoclastic perspective. Today we'll look at what Paul Harvey used to call the story behind the story. As we've done before, we'll just call this all the news that's fit to print that the New York Times wouldn't. Now, while we normally begin the broadcast with comments by Yoni Tidi, he'll not be able to join us today. Tune in next week to hear his comments. Instead, I will offer this. Words, concepts, they have meaning. And we need to pay attention because they often define the narrative. There's a great parable that's told by Israel Eldad in his book, The Jewish Revolution. Eldad was a brilliant Zionist philosopher, one of the architects of the pre-state underground group Lehi, which fought against the British. In his endeavor to get the reader to understand how the truth has no meaning in the Arab world, Eldad tells us a story about Arabs and how they believe their own lies, something best illustrated by this Middle East parable. An Arab father, trying to catch an afternoon nap in a home full of boisterous children, barks out the lie that they're giving away free figs at the local market. The loud children all run out to the market to get those free figs. Moments later, as he places his head on his pillow in a now empty house, he thinks for an instant, and he too suddenly jumps up and runs to the shuk to get some of those fictitious figs. Such is the case of the Arab grasp of the truth. The line between fact and fantasy disappears, as it has with greater occurrence throughout the whole Western world. That the Arabs believe their own myths and lies is nothing new. It seems endemic to their culture. That the Western world has joined that run for the figs is indeed quite troubling. 5 weeks ago, we brought you an interview from Israel with our guest today, Dr. Melissa Jane Kronfeld. The response from listeners was quite powerful and very fully supportive. We focused on some of the recent turmoil in Israel, specifically the reality of a continued Israeli surrender of the Temple Mount to Israel's enemies. Those of you who know the history of modern-day Israel know that in the aftermath of the remarkable victory in the Six-Day War in June 1967, 55 years ago, know this also. Thanks to Moshe Dayan, Israel was able to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. Following a miraculous victory by Israel over a genocidal enemy and the liberation of the historic Jewish lands, including Jerusalem and the Temple Mount, Israel, in an act of national insanity, informed the Arabs that they would continue to control the Temple Mount. The Waqf, the Islamic religious authority which had ruled over the Temple Mount during Jordan's illegal occupation of eastern Jerusalem for 19 years, from 1948 until 1967, and which practiced a policy of Judenrein, no Jews allowed, while the Waqf would continue to control Israel's and the Jewish people's holiest site, the holiest site in Judaism. Despite Israel's brilliant military victory, Moshe Dayan gave proof to the myth of Jewish intelligence. That level of insanity is still extant today. And with that as a backdrop, let me offer a cordial welcome to Dr. Melissa Jane Kronfeld. Melissa, thank you for joining us again.
Thank you for having me.
Very simple question. The lesson of yesteryear, trying to appease the enemy with a conciliatory gesture, the type that the Temple Mount was left in their hands. What's been the byproduct of that today, 55 years later? Could you begin with that, please?
Sure. So I may betray myself and my 40 years of age, but it reminds me of the line that the little crab said in the Little Mermaid: "If you give them an inch, they take a mile." And that's really what we're dealing with here, both in the current time and throughout Jewish history. What we've seen is time and time again, Israel believes that brokering peace with our enemies by giving them land or conceding access to our holy sites is going to be what creates a sustainable peace. But the truth of the matter is, and I don't want to shock your listeners, but there's no such thing as peace in the Middle East. What we can have is coexistence. That is, if we lived in a world where coexistence was what, the state of affairs is the status quo, then that would be sustainable. I think when you live outside of Israel, you grow up in the diaspora, or you're not Jewish, you look at the history of the world and you say, but so often we've had peace, whether it's 30 years war centuries ago, or the Peace of Westphalia, which brought about the modern state system, or the Peace of World War I and World War II, or the Peace of the Cold War, which we're now seeing fastly unraveling. We like to think that peace is a concrete, tangible thing that we can employ and use and that will stay in place. But the real history of the world is just a constant state of flux. And I don't know why, in its less than 100-year history, the Jewish people and our governments continue to believe that concessions will win the day. If there's anything to learn living here in the Middle East, is that for all the advancements that have been made in Arab societies, for all the legislators and the judges and the lawyers and the doctors and across the Middle East and the Arab world, at the end of the day, the Arab world still functions very much so on the premise of power and violence. That's why we see such high rates of domestic violence and child abuse in these communities. That's why we often see so much clan warfare. We can uplift the Arab world as much as we like. We can impose upon them modernity. We can build great cities like Dubai. But at the end of the day, the Arab world still functions in the villages and in the small communities that most of the Arab people exist in. And in those places, power and, unfortunately, violence is key. Now, that does not mean that Israel needs to employ violence to win the day, although, as Rav Kahana once said, violence is sometimes necessary. But what it does teach us is that the Arab world, and particularly Palestinian Arabs, really, they do respond to power dynamics. And if Israel, I've seen it myself in small situations where I've seen, young Jews stand up to Arabs harassing a woman or harassing them. They almost, most of the time, they immediately retreat. It's almost embarrassing and cringeworthy at times. But really, if Israel stood up for itself and was the state and the people and the nation and the children of God that they are destined to be, then I think we would see a far different response. The Abraham Accords are imperfect, but I think that says a lot about what I'm talking about in the political context. When we've placed, thanks to President Trump, when we place Israel on an equal dynamic in terms of power, instead of saying you have to give this or that to get peace with the Palestinians, when we put the Arab communities and the Jewish state on equal footing, what we have seen is the respect. Respect matters in the Arab world. They've come, many of these Arab countries, even if they have ulterior motives, even if they don't truly believe it, we've created a level of respect. And what Israel has refused to do internally in its own borders, the Palestinian people, is respect itself. respect what God gave it, respect the borders of this country that are clearly defined in biblical terms and have been set forth by God for time immemorial. And thus we wind up in the situation that we're in today. You said something very interesting. You said Arabs believe their own lies. Well, so do the Jews. Unfortunately, we're Semitic people, all of us. We're cousins, right? Isaac and Ishmael. We have the same father, and unfortunately, I don't know if it's because we've been in the Middle East for too long. Of course, this is a place where we belong, so it's never too long. But we have started believing our own lies. We've started believing that we don't need to control the Temple Mount, that we can split Jerusalem, that there can be a Palestinian state that's set into two separate pieces and have a silly road that runs between them, that we can give up Judea and Samaria, that the Jewish settlements, and as the recent failure of the passing of the legislation for settlers denotes, is that we believe that these things don't matter. And at some point, we need to stop believing the lies we're not only selling ourselves, but the lies that the Arab community are perpetuating to the world that we've basically bought into.
It's
sorry,
true.
save affairs.
Sorry
to start off.
No. There's certainly quite certainly. There's a difference between peace and an absence of war, as you said. And it's a very valid point about Jews believing their lies. I would like to think, I'd like to think that the reason the Jews believe these lies is for political expedience as opposed to the Arabs who believe it as a matter of culture. You brought up the issue of the control of the Temple Mount. Now, that's been controversial since Israel liberated, as I mentioned, in June 1967. In fact, it was Moti Gur who commanded the 55th Paratroopers Brigade that penetrated the old city of Jerusalem and broadcast those famous words, the English translation, of course, the Temple Mount is in our hands, Hebrew, Har Bayit Beyardenu. Now, that proved to be premature because Israel, in a gesture of goodwill towards the Arabs, even while Jewish soldiers were being buried, allowed the Islamic Waqf to control the Mount. And the Jewish people have paid the price ever since. I mean, it's remarkable to note that during that 19 years of Jordanian occupation of eastern Jerusalem between 48 and 67, not one Arab leader visited the Temple Mount. That's how significant it was to them. But once Israel liberated and reunified Jerusalem as undivided, all of a sudden the area became important to the Muslims. So why doesn't the government of Israel make this point known in diplomatic circles? And the answer is because it upsets the narrative. And that narrative is that peace is somehow attainable. The Temple Mount is in our hands. Is there anything less true today than that claim of Moti Gur then?
There is nothing less true. I like to repeat the phrase. I like to say it when we're there. I like to share it with guests that I bring up because I believe that we can manifest our destiny, that if we see and believe and we carry these words with us, that we can make that reality true again. But there really is there's nothing further for the truth. And I can tell you that since the Ramadan riot, since we last spoke, the situation has grown a lot worse in a lot of ways, and in some ways better. What we have seen, unfortunately, is I guess it was from the conversations that Naftali Bennett had with the Jordanians after the riots, but we've seen a vast increase in WAF security up there. There are far more members. They're being far more aggressive. We saw cycling out. It's kind of interesting because we're there every day. We know who the WAF guys are. We know who follows us, who takes our pictures, who works the doors, who works the gates. And what we've seen is the vast majority of people that have been up there with us for about the past 2 years are gone. And there's a whole new crew of bad guys up there. And I'm not sure if Jordan didn't prepare them for what we do up there, which is not ancient Talmudic rituals. It's literally prayer and walking. But we've seen a really aggressive WAF up there. They're increasingly aggravated by our action. You can tell they're yelling more at the cops to stop us from doing things that we are doing. The filming has become, and I don't mind the filming. I'm also happy to sign autographs, as I often tell them. But the filming has become really. It used to be one camera sometimes, and most of the time the guy would just be on his phone. Now we're talking 2 or 3 guys following us around, filming us. The footage of which your listeners are welcome to watch on the Al Quds Facebook channel. I always wave to the watchers. But we've really, really seen an uptick in this. And even the other day when we were up there, we started singing softly, and a large crowd of WASP security came over. I'm talking, it may not seem large to your listeners, but about 10 to 12 WASP members came over and basically forced the cops to force us off the Har. And we were forced out of one of the Muslim entrance exits that we don't usually go through. And so it was quite remarkable, one, to step through that door, because I'd never been through that passageway before. But, it feels a little bit more explosive up there, certainly a bit more oppressive up there. But that's not going to deter us. And I think that's what is lost on Jordan, and is certainly lost on the crass coalition government, is that there's nothing that's going to stop us from doing what we're doing. We're going to continue to pray. We're going to continue to walk. We're going to continue to extend. We're going to continue to bring more and more people. We've seen an increase of young men and women prostrating on the Temple Mount, knowing the consequences of their actions, knowing they can get detained, arrested, and banned. I don't think I've ever seen the activists of the Temple Mount and those who support us more emboldened. So, the harder they push, the harder we're going to push back. And
Melissa, I'm sorry, that commercial break, which is set in stone, comes up in 30 seconds. From Israel today, we have Melissa Jane Kronfeld, doctor. She deconstructs the myths of the struggle of the Temple Mount. And as I said earlier, the topic today, Israel's disconnect from reality, a bold and iconoclastic perspective. When we come back from the commercial break, we'll pick up more of this. Thank you.
Dassault and Macros are my business and personal CPAs for a good reason. Prompt and accurate work means I trust them with all my accounting needs. Conveniently located just off the 51 freeway at 3519 East Shea Boulevard, Suite 122, give them a call and see what they can do for you. 602-996-8885. That's Dassault and Macros, 602-996-8885. There are a lot of great Mexican restaurants in Phoenix, but I am very particular. When I want the best Mexican lunch or dinner, I head straight to Mi Patio on the southeast corner of 7th Avenue in Osborne. They serve all your favorite dishes and only use pure vegetable oil in their cooking. Mi Patio is sure to become your favorite Mexican restaurant, too. That's Mi Patio Mexican Restaurant on the southeast corner of 7th Avenue in Osborne. Tell them that William Wolf sent you there. Watermark Wealth Strategies and Watermark Wealth Planning offices at 11333 North Scottsdale Road, Suite 295 in Scottsdale. Has been a loyal sponsor of this program since its start. They specialize in wealth retention, estate, and legacy planning. Watermark has been a leader in the Valley, and its members have been together for over 17 years. Founding partner Carmen Cercone has over 36 years of experience in tax, investment, and estate planning issues affecting retirees and their assets. They offer comprehensive planning that has helped assist families through the process of identifying client objectives and concerns and constructing a strategic plan to address tax, risk, and legacy issues. Consultations are complimentary, and we encourage you to contact Allison Porter at 480-442-3989 to schedule. Securities offered through Kestra Investment Services, LLC, member FINRA/SIPC. Investment advisory services offered through Kestra Advisory Services, LLC, an affiliate of Kestra Investment Services. Watermark Wealth Strategies, LLC is not affiliated with Kestra Investment Services or Kestra Advisory Services. How do you choose your accident injury attorney? If you need heart surgery, do you choose your surgeon from seeing an ad on TV or a billboard? Of course not. Choosing your attorney also should not be done so casually and without thought. I do not advertise on TV or billboards, but only on this radio show. I give all clients personal attention. Your phone calls are never intercepted by some untrained assistant. I take all calls if I am available or return calls at my earliest opportunity. I was named Trial Attorney of the Year by the Arizona Trial Lawyers Association 2 years ago and have 48 years of experience. So think about it and choose your accident attorney wisely. My number is 602-279-1914, and my office is located at 7301 North 16th Street, Suite 203 in Phoenix. I personally welcome your call. Again, 602-279-1914.
You're listening to Middle East Radio Forum on 960 The Patriot. Questions are welcome at radioforum@aol.com. That's radioforum at aol.com. Now your host for the Middle East Radio Forum, Meir Jolovitz.
Hi, welcome back. Thank you for joining us. Quite often, you've heard me suggest that words matter. I've long argued that language defines the narrative, and, of course, the narrative directs the debate. But because we so often surrender our common sense, we fall prey to the adversary. Language can sometimes be controversial, even when it ought not to be. Let me give you an example of what I mean. Here's a quote that made the rounds in 2012. Listen to the quote. In any war between the civilized man and the savage, support the civilized man. Simple enough. And yet, is there a moral being who doesn't actually agree with that? In a war between the civilized man and the savage, support the civilized man. Well, in 2012, Pamela Geller, the executive director of the American Freedom Defense Initiative, spoke those words. Her organization's pro-Israel posters appeared in 10 New York subway stations after a federal judge ruled that the city and the MTA must keep them up because they took them down. The ad, I remind you, reads, in any war between the civilized man and the savage, support the civilized man. But in smaller letters below, it said, support Israel, defeat jihad. And that apparently was controversial. The quotation created an outrage. Pamela Geller was shouted down by virtually every and all liberal voices, including, of course, Jewish ones. And our enemies relished as they observed the insanity that permeates Western thought. There's a war going on, my friends. It's a war of ideas, and it's a war that we are losing. Such is the case also in Israel. Pamela, you were talking about the Temple Mount and the need. Excuse me, I said Pamela. Melissa.
Pamela is amazing, and I'm humbled and honored, but I'm not sure if she would accept the same graciousness. But Pamela is great. No, that's fine.
She's
Melissa.
Yeah, she's a dear friend.
She's brilliant.
Brilliant.
Okay,
we have online from Israel now, Dr. Melissa Jane Kronfeld, intrepid voice, daring and unafraid. Go ahead, Melissa.
So I was talking before the break about the increase in the presence of the WASC and how really I've been feeling the oppressiveness of this. But I don't want to leave your listeners with thinking that the fight is not turning in our favor because it is. And there's a couple of really good examples. As I mentioned, we've seen an increase in visitors. We have more visitors now than ever. It's causing a lot of disdain and disgust in the highest levels of government. We've also seen some very interesting rulings in the courts. In the past few months, we had a lawsuit, I believe it was brought by Bea Danu from quite a while ago, the arrest of a rabbi for prostrating on the Temple Mount, then moving up the court system. And the courts ruled that Jews have the right to pray. All people have the right to pray. It's part of our freedom of expression. It's part of our freedom of religion anywhere. And you can't restrict the right to prayer in one place and then, you can't not restrict it in one place and then restrict it in another. That doesn't follow the letter of the law. And that was very exciting to us. Of course, we paused and waited because we knew that the higher courts were going to overrule it, and they did for security reasons. But more recently, in the past few weeks, the magistrate court in Jerusalem actually overruled a ban on 3 young men who had said Shema and prostrated on the Temple Mount because they declared that it does not endanger public security. And so that was very exciting for us, too. And the whole premise of their argument, why they won, was because the head of the police had said that, we have freedom of religion in this country, and therefore the boys, or their lawyers argued, believed that if we have freedom of religion, freedom to express that religion anywhere, then that included the Temple Mount. Now, of course, later that day, or I think it was 2 days later, the court clarified that they're not ruling on religious freedoms and expressions and religious rights, but in fact they are. And these are two small victories. These are two small legal victories that are now on the books that we can continue to point to. And I know that it has become the strategy of some of the activists of Be'edenu, in particular Tom Nisani and Akiva, who we work closely with, amazing young men, that, perhaps we need to start bringing lawyers up with us to the Temple Mount in all our groups. To stand there and be the letter of the law for us and defend our rights, because we were summarily taken off the har or last week for absolutely no reason. Clearly what we're doing is ruffling some feathers. As a personal note, the policy of the Israeli government is that, as you noted, is that Jordanians control the top of the Temple Mount, and we essentially control the bottom. If your listeners have ever been to Israel, they would know the City of David, the underground tunnels, the Western Wall complex. That's the bottom. That's the bottom of the Temple Mount, and we control that. We manage that. We have access to that unrestricted, and the Jordanians get the top. And so that's the policy that restricts our prayer. But really, at the end of the day, you have these two things that are in conflict with one another. You have this kind of false restriction that exists, and another sovereign country maintaining control over a very small area of land in another sovereign country, which doesn't make any sense legally, historically, politically, nationally, and what has wound up happening is that we're kind of pushing the boundaries of what the law and what these judges are continually ruling on our side. We're pushing back and saying, these two things can't exist together, and one of them is going to have to give. And I will tell your listeners personally, clearly whatever we're doing is been climbing up the ranks. I will say the other day, I won't get into too many details, but I was personally informed by the incredible members of our Israel Police Department that they have been looking at our social media at the highest levels of the government, up in the Office of Public Security, and they are displeased with what they see. Well, let them be displeased. Let them be displeased. Because when was it a crime for a Jew to pray? When was it for a crime for a Jew to pray in Israel, or for a Jew to pray on the Temple Mount? Because last time I checked, we have an unbroken bond with that place since the time of Adam and Eve. We've been praying there for centuries.
I'm sorry, Melissa, just by way of clarification for the non-Jewish audience, and we have quite a large one. No, we have quite a large one. When you mentioned that they were praying the Shema is a short prayer in Judaism, perhaps the quintessential, the most important one, which is nothing more and nothing less than the affirmation of one God. And to imagine that the utterance of the words from the Shema, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one, is a controversial subject, held controversial by the Israeli authorities as well, gives one reason to be concerned.
Absolutely. And of all things, let us not forget is that Judaism is the foundational faith. All your Christian listeners, all your Muslim listeners, they all believe in the 5 books. They believe in the Torah. It is part of their faith too. They believe in these scriptures. And they believe that there is one God, that God is one, and that He is indivisible, and that we all come from His divine providence. And so to live in a state, and I can tell your listeners just personally, I say the Shema multiple times when I'm on Temple Mount, so don't worry, we're keeping the prayers going. But to live in a Jewish state, to have made Aliyah at 35 years old, to have given up everything that I have ever known, living in New York, living with access to anything and everything, growing up in an affluent community with a family that gave me every single opportunity to have multiple delivery services, Amazon Prime, and then to come to a Jewish state, to give up everything, and against my family's wishes. My family was not then and is not now pleased that I'm here. To come here alone at 35 years old and restart my life in the Jewish state, because I believe so strongly that it was necessary for me to be here physically and to fight here and to have a presence here, and then to come across Temple Mount and find my purpose there, and to confront this on a daily basis. Jewish cops wearing kippot, telling me I can't pray at our synagogue. It's just an unbelievable experience.
Melissa,
and any of your listeners who are in Israel, I will take them to the Temple Mount so they can experience it with
Melissa,
me.
you are a firebrand, but even the firebrand has to succumb to the the predetermined commercial breaks, one which comes up in 15 seconds. We have with us from Israel Dr. Melissa Jane Kronfeld, who frequents the Temple Mount weekly, several times a week, and is certainly the live voice that we want to hear. We'll talk about American foreign policy vis-a-vis Israel when we come back.
Friends of the Israel Defense Forces offers educational, cultural, recreational, and social services that provide hope, purpose, and life-changing support for the soldiers who protect Israel. FIDF is the sole organization authorized to collect donations on behalf of the soldiers of the IDF. For more information or to make a donation, please visit fidf.org or call 323-843-2690. Watermark Wealth Strategies and Watermark Wealth Planning offices at 11333 North Scottsdale Road, Suite 295 in Scottsdale. Has been a loyal sponsor of this program since its start. They specialize in wealth retention, estate, and legacy planning. Watermark has been a leader in the Valley, and its members have been together for over 17 years. Founding partner Carmen Cercone has over 36 years of experience in tax, investment, and estate planning issues affecting retirees and their assets. They offer comprehensive planning that has helped assist families through the process of identifying client objectives and concerns and constructing a strategic plan to address tax, risk, and legacy issues. Consultations are complimentary, and we encourage you to contact Allison Porter at 480-442-3989 to schedule. Securities offered through Kestra Investment Services, LLC, member FINRA/SIPC. Investment advisory services offered through Kestra Advisory Services, LLC, an affiliate of Kestra Investment Services. Watermark Wealth Strategies, LLC, is not affiliated with Kestra Investment Services or Kestra Advisory Services.
Gilligan's on Maryland, on the northwest corner of 7th Street in Maryland, is much more than just a great Shell station and mini-mart. Great cook-to-order food, different flavors of coffee and tea, beer and fine wine, including kosher wine, round out a wonderful one-stop shopping experience. A loyal sponsor of Middle East Radio Forum. Check them out on the northwest corner of 7th Street in Maryland in Phoenix. That's Gilligan's on Maryland. Phone number 602-277-6269.
Veggie Village, the best vegan restaurant in Arizona, has a second location. Still at 1255 East Northern, now also at 15577 North Hayden Road, Suite C103 in Scottsdale. Chicken, beef, calamari, shrimp, and more, all made out of plants, all a delight to their taste buds. You just have to try it for yourself. Not open on Sunday on Northern, but open 7 days in Scottsdale. Give them a try and you will be back for more. This is William Wolf. My weekday job is a personal injury attorney in practice since 1971. I have been named Trial Attorney of the Year by the Arizona Trial Lawyers Association. My office is at 7301 North 16th Street, Suite 203 in Phoenix. There is no charge for our first meeting, and I take all cases on a contingent fee basis. Call me at 602-279-1914. That's 602-279-1914. I look forward to meeting you.
You're listening to Middle East Radio Forum on 960 The Patriot. Questions are welcome at Radio Forum at AOL.com. That's Radio Forum at AOL.com. Now your host for the Middle East Radio Forum, Meir Jolovitz.
Hi, welcome back. There are those who express their pro-Israel sentiment or advocacy by word and others by deed. And our guest today certainly does both. Only an idiot, and we certainly have no limited supply, will refuse to acknowledge that American foreign policy is in complete conflict with Israel's claim to Jerusalem as the undivided capital of Israel. Despite American law, based on the 1995 Jerusalem Act and the subsequent recognition by the Trump administration in 2018, the Biden administration is planning and establishing a Palestinian consulate in Jerusalem, which brings to question, of course, who Jerusalem might belong to. Now, why this hasn't created outrage that it would in the case of any other nation which asserts its right to its own capital is perhaps a rhetorical question we can all answer. It was Professor J.J. Jones who often actually cites a great quote attributed to an anonymous source. Light travels faster than sound. That's why most people seem bright until you hear them speak. How true that is. Now, with the intersection of stupidity and cowardice at play, we allow ourselves to become victims of a political conflict that we are bound to lose. Melissa, the truth matters. How can our audience access the work that you do?
I'd love to share that. I would just love to add one point to what you said.
Please.
You said in the beginning that words really matter. And I love that. That's what I wrote my dissertation on when I got my doctorate. And it's something that your American audience should be acutely aware of right now is our preeminent squad, the members of whom I shall not name, like mass shooters because they don't deserve the recognition, are working on, it's probably seen about in the press, are working on a bill about passing a bill that recognizes the NAVCA Day. Now, some of you may have overlooked that. Some of you may not have been paying attention to that. But for those of you who don't know, NAVCA means catastrophe. Mm-hmm. The Palestinians celebrate the catastrophe of the State of Israel. And you have four or five Congress people now in your government, my government too, I'm still an American, in our government, we're trying to pass legislation to recognize the catastrophe of the State of Israel. Not to recognize NAVCA Day on behalf of the Palestinians, to recognize the catastrophe of the State of Israel. Words matter. You put that just like the judges here in Israel that have said we have a right to pray and that you cannot restrict our prayer from one place to another. This is a law, this is legislation that is potentially going to be passed, recognizing the catastrophe of the State of Israel. And if you care about Israel, if you have Jewish friends, if you even, believe that standing with the civilized man is important, no matter what you think about Israel and the Middle East, then you have to stand against these women and their associates who are trying to pass a law that says we recognize the catastrophe of the existence of the State of Israel. So that's an action item that your audience can take away. Mm-hmm. Elections are coming up. Fine. The only question you should ask the people running in your local district is, obviously there are local issues you should ask too, but ask them what their views are on Israel. Ask them where they stand on Israel. Ask them if they go to J Street or AIPAC. Ask them what they feel about the NAVCA Day legislation. Ask them what their views are on the eternal capital of the State of Israel of Jerusalem. And if they say anything less than I stand fully and completely behind the Jewish people, then you know who not to vote for this election season. And so with that said, I will return to your question. And I apologize for
Not at all.
So in terms of, if your listeners would like to learn more about our work on the Temple Mount, we just launched our new website. Our advocacy work on the Temple Mount is under a new nonprofit. It's called High on the Har. High, traditional spelling, high on the Har, because when you are up there, you are elevated in spirit, in mind, and soul. You are closer to God. You are literally on the mountain. You are on Mount Moriah. You are literally high on the Har. For your listeners who are not Jewish, Har means mountain in Hebrew. highonthehar.com is our new website. It's launching soon, but the front page is there, and it allows you to contact us. It also allows you to donate, and the donations go exclusively to us being able to provide free tours to individuals coming to secure really intelligent, amazing rabbis who have an extensive knowledge of the history, the faith, the archaeology. A lot of them are archaeological experts on the Temple Mount. I personally have an expertise I'm developing an expertise on the rocks up there. And so High on the Har, supporting High on the Har allows us to get more people up on the Temple Mount, because you're our allies. Whether you're Jewish or not, by coming to the Temple Mount, entering through the Jewish gate, and ascending with the Jewish group, and participating in our daily minyans with Yeshiva Harabite and Rabbi Yehuda Levi, my partner, you are an active ally in the fight. You are letting the WASC and the Jordanians and the anti-Israel Arab community know that this is not something that we are going to give up. Your simple presence there is a statement. You coming with us allows us to normalize Jewish presence on the Temple Mount, which is just bizarre to me that I have to keep repeating this statement, that I have to, at age 40, be normalizing my presence at my synagogue. It still blows my mind every time it comes out of my mouth. But High on the Har is our new project, and we'll be launching the full website soon. And you can follow us on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram, and on TikTok at High on the Har. We post pictures daily of what's going on up there, and they're gorgeous. And if they don't inspire you and move you and bring you closer to God, then I'm not doing a good enough job, because I know that they are certainly pissing off the highest levels of our security in our government.
Hold on.
So,
you're doing a great job, but I wouldn't be doing mine if I didn't interrupt you right now to introduce the last commercial break. This was the shortest segment. When we come back, it'll be the longest segment. Listeners here in Arizona, we urge you, please let the sponsors of this show know that you endorse their products and their services because you've heard about them on this show. It's because of them that we're able to keep this brokerage show in the air. Commercial break coming. When we come back, it'll be the longest segment, the final segment from Israel with Dr. Melissa Jane Kronfeld, a wonderful guest.
This is William Wolf. My weekday job is a personal injury attorney in practice since 1971. I have been named Trial Attorney of the Year by the Arizona Trial Lawyers Association. My office is at 7301 North 16th Street, Suite 203 in Phoenix. There is no charge for our first meeting, and I take all cases on a contingent fee basis. Call me at 602-279-1914. That's 602-279-1914. I look forward to meeting you.
Gilligan's on Maryland, on the northwest corner of 7th Street in Maryland, is much more than just a great Shell station and mini-mart. Great cook-to-order food, different flavors of coffee and tea, beer and fine wine, including kosher wine, round out a wonderful one-stop shopping experience. A loyal sponsor of Middle East Radio Forum. Check them out on the northwest corner of 7th Street in Maryland in Phoenix. That's Gilligan's on Maryland. Phone number 602-277-6269.
Cherry Blossom Noodle Cafe has terrific sushi, salads, rice and noodle dishes, soup, and even great pasta. On the northwest corner of 10th Street and Camelback, it will become your favorite Asian restaurant. A loyal sponsor of Middle East Radio Forum for more than 10 years, it is simply the best place for a great Asian lunch or dinner. That's Cherry Blossom Noodle Cafe on the northwest corner of 10th Street and Camelback. Tell them that William Wolf sent you there. Telephone 602-248-9090. Texas Grill on the northeast corner of Bethany Home Road and 16th Street has been my favorite steakhouse for 31 years. Great food, especially their chicken fried steak, as well as daily specials in a comfortable setting, keeps me coming back for more. You just have to try it for yourself. Also a great Sunday brunch starting at 10 in the morning. That's Texas Grill on the northeast corner of Bethany Home Road and 16th Street. Give them a try and you will have a new favorite steakhouse too. My name is William J. Wolf, host of Middle East Radio Forum since 2003. As you may know, I am a personal injury attorney in practice since 1971. I was just awarded the high honor of Trial Attorney of the Year by the Arizona Trial Lawyers Association. I handle all types of personal injury and wrongful death cases. Unlike many other attorneys, especially the high-volume TV advertising attorneys, I do go to court if necessary to obtain the best possible resolution for all my clients. It is often impossible to obtain the best possible result if your lawyer does not have the reputation of being willing to go to court on all matters. If you have a claim, please call me for a free initial consultation at 602-279-1914. My office is at 7301 North 16th Street, Suite 203 in Phoenix. Again, call 602-279-1914. I look forward to meeting you and making sure that you obtain the best possible recovery. Call 602-279-1914 and please continue to support Middle East Radio Forum.
You're listening to Middle East Radio Forum on 960 The Patriot. Questions are welcome at radioforum at AOL.com. That's radioforum at AOL.com. Now your host for the Middle East Radio Forum, Meir Jolovitz.
Hi, welcome back. Our guest, Dr. Melissa Jane Kronfeld, Ph.D. from Rutgers, received a B.A. with International Relations from George Washington University, a Master's Global Affairs from New York University, another Master's in Global Affairs from Rutgers also. She's lectured extensively in American foreign policy, which I'll get to in a minute, and national security on various campuses. If I was to list all the her accomplishments that I have in the resume in front of me, we would have to dedicate, and perhaps we will, a future show just to reading her resume. Let me bring in politics. I'm going to do a segue between the Temple Mount and also the PA in American foreign policy vis-a-vis Israel. This year, on the eve of August 6th, Jews everywhere are going to commemorate the destruction of both holy temples in Jerusalem. The first time, as we know, in the year 586 BCE, and again the destruction of the second, the rebuilt temple, in the year 70 CE. Tisha B'Av, which is the 9th of Av, the month of Av, is the day that we mourn and we fast. We commemorate the various tragedies that befell the Jews that day, but particularly the two temples. It's the saddest and most solemn day of the Jewish calendar. And yet, the Palestinian Authority leaders continue to deny the existence of Jewish temples. The PA, the Palestinian Authority, actually denies that there ever were Jewish temples on the Temple Mount. Now, you don't have to be a long-time observer of Middle East affairs to understand that Arabs lie all the time about everything. In fact, it's endemic to all Muslims. It's a cultural thing. It's a religious thing. It's a political thing. It is Islam personified. And if you don't realize that, please raise your hand and plead guilty to the charge of who here is a moron. Now, let me read you an article that appeared in this morning's paper, okay? Mahmoud Abbas, head of the PA, meets visiting senior U.S. diplomats. The subtitle, PA chairman asks visiting U.S. officials to remove the PLO from the terror list and reopen the U.S. consulate in Jerusalem. I want to read a couple of very important sentences. Palestinian Authority Mahmoud Abbas held meetings in Ramallah. He held meetings with Assistant Secretary of State Barbara Leaf and also Palestinian Affairs and Israeli Affairs Hadi Amar, who's got quite an extensive resume himself in his hatred for Israel. Abbas said that the PLO, and I'm quoting now, is a full peace partner and has signed a series of peace agreements sponsored by the United States with Israel. Abbas also urged the United States to work to reopen the closed offices of the PLO in Washington and so on and so on and so forth. Okay? The United States responded by saying that Joe Biden wants to meet with Mahmoud Abbas and consider, of course, the request that Mahmoud Abbas has, that the PLO no longer be considered worthy of that terror list. It's an embarrassment. It's an abomination. Now, how interesting. Pick any week of the year during the past few years. Go to the social media of the Palestinian Authority. Go to Facebook. Go to its website. Go to TV broadcasts, radio broadcasts, its own news wires. You'll find an ongoing litany of anti-Semitic and genocidal pronouncements. You'll find not only an endorsement of terror against Israel, but incitement that propagates terrorism against Israel. It's the pay for slay that we've spoken about quite often in this show. Is this what Mahmoud Abbas calls the PLO being a full peace partner? My suggestion, let's stop this insanity. Sure, a peace partner, the PLO, the PA. It's like saying that Dr. Jack Kevorkian was a reputable life extension practitioner. This is insane. One last comment before we go to the guest. A quote from a Palestinian funeral for the Al Jazeera journalist a few weeks ago. What was the chant that was heard everywhere by thousands and thousands of people? The chant was, "How sweet it is to kill Jews." Later, at a funeral held for an Arab terrorist who was neutralized by the Israelis, the Fatah Revolutionary Council member yelled, "We love martyrdom and death as we do life," and affirmed the need to kill Jews. Melissa, where are we going with this?
You make some great points, and for those, the uninitiated or even the initiated, it seems kind of far away, right? Oh, this terrorist organization is saying death to the Jews, and then these people are rioting at a funeral. But if I can get personal for a second, I think I shared a little bit about this last time I was on the air, but I had some that frequents Temple Mount, we know this from her social media, post my personal information online. She posted my personal information online, and she made multiple videos of basically fatwa videos where she posted my username, my handle, which you're all welcome to follow me at MJEMNE_JAY. It's MJ spelled phonetically. And she posted a bunch of videos on her Instagram and across social media of them screaming death to the Jews, kill the Jews. Just the most horrific scenes that you've ever seen. And all of them had my name dead smack in the middle. And I was tagged in all of them. And for approximately 3 weeks, I received thousands of death threats a day, thousands of pig emojis, thousands of phone calls emails, text messages from people telling me they were going to kill me, that they see me on the Har. I even got a couple of people sending pictures, who sent me pictures of myself on the Har that they had taken, because those viewers who don't know me personally, I am very tall. I have blonde hair and blue eyes, so I certainly stand out amongst my Haredi Orthodox friends a little bit. And so you can think about it in the context of these big organizations saying death to the Jews and horrible, and push them from the river to the sea and all this jazz. And you could also look at it from my personal experience. I personally underwent for 3 weeks their hatred, their constant assaults. And sure, you can say it's social media, it doesn't matter. But, for the first few days, it was extremely scary. Being told that I see you, I know who you are. I'm a very public person. People know that I live in Tel Aviv. They know that I frequent Jerusalem. My schedule remains mostly the same. I'm not saying anything that the Islamists already don't know, for those of you that are cringing at home. But so when you break it down, I can tell you from my personal experience that their hatred is insatiable. To this day, still, it's been about 6 weeks now since the Ramadan riots. To this day, I still receive about 10 to 15 death threats a day. There is nothing that the Islamist community, and I don't say Islam, but the Islamists and the Islamists, that community will not do to prevent Jews from living as civilized people in the state that God gave them, in the promised land that God set aside for them, to live the Jewish life that God has mandated for them. There is nothing that they won't do. I can tell you this from personal experience.
So true.
And that's not enough to break that. It's the thing to break it down for your audience is that seems really high level when you talk about Hamas and Fatah and Islamic Jihad saying death to the Jews. But I had Fatah, Hamas, and Islamic Jihad and the basic Palestinian Arabs in East Jerusalem saying death to Melissa for weeks. And it was, it was horrifying. And after I got used to all the death threats and nothing happened to me, I just started trolling them back. So now I post even more. Now I tag her back on some stuff. She's actually taken her account offline. I guess I won that battle. But the truth is that it goes back to what I said in the first segment of our show, is that if we just stand up for ourselves, if we just be the Jews that we are, when you look at our history of Abraham, Moshe, Joshua, Akiva, Bar Chova, our history is replete with heroes that stood strong. They stood strong as Jewish leaders. They stood strong as heroes in war. They stood strong even at the times that were the hardest for them. And what happened? They always won. Sure, some of them died in the end, Bar Chova included, right? But at the end of the day, the Jews always won. When the Jews don't win, is when they stray from Sklara, when they stray from what they know is the end of the story, when they stray from respecting themselves, and when they stray from the very power that Hashem has imbued in us to stand for what is right, for what is just, for what is good, and for what we know will be, for civilized society, a light unto the nation.
Good for you. Good for you. That's absolutely true. The only unfortunate thing is, and time doesn't allow, perhaps in a future broadcast, is all true, is that in Jewish history, quite often, the great things that have been accomplished by the Jewish minority against the very interest of the Jewish establishment. That's the reality, and that goes back from the very beginning through the Warsaw Ghetto. The Warsaw Ghetto uprising.
And that's our reality today.
It's an absolute reality today. It's an absolute. Your listeners may be hearing a lot about the rise of the radical right, about MK Itamar Ben Gvir, Betzalel Smotrich, these amazing men in the religious Zionist party, Otzma Yehudit, and they talk about us as being a fringe. We are not a fringe. There's a reason why Likud has more seats than the coalition had to put together 12, 15, 40 different mini random parties and a bunch of Arab terrorists to take control of our government. This country is a center-right country, and this so-called rise of the radical right, the so-called rise of Itamar Ben Gvir, this evil, Kahanist, racist, it's absurd the way the American press and certainly the Israeli press are framing it. It's not a rise of anything. It's a return. Mm-hmm. It's a return to our natural state of being. Itamar Ben Gvir is the leader that we need now. The religious right is the leadership that we need in this government. Those of us who stand on the right and the center right of the political spectrum are what we have always been.
We are the ones who will stand against hate, stand against anti-Semitism, stand against our enemies, and take, no BS, because I'm sure I can't curse on your radio show, but take no BS from Hamas, Islamic Jihad, and certainly Mahmoud Abbas, a failed leader who can't even, who's in the past 2 years had his own people protest against him, who can't rally anybody out into the streets in favor of him, who the youth who has no interest in him anymore. What we are witnessing. This is why I'm hopeful. This is why I want to leave your listening audience with great hope and great nachas, is because we are in the process of returning to the natural state of being. That does not mean Likud. That does not mean Bibi Netanyahu. We are returning to a real right, religious right.
Allow me, while I still have you in the air, to throw in this quote, which I've been holding in my side, looking for the appropriate time to throw it, and I'm going to give it to you right now. It's a quote from one of the books from Rabbi Meir Jolovitz. It's a wonderful thing about maintaining our resolve. Let me just read this to you. Time is always on the side of the tenacious. Conversely, it is the enemy of the wary. The constant and never-ending struggle tends to erode the determination to achieve total victory and pushes tired men into the search of solutions and compromises that are often more the product of a desire to rest than of common sense. Those who are tired allow themselves to believe things that freshness of vigor would label as nonsense. Exhaustion and fear push us into self-delusion. What wise words. And unfortunately, once again, representing minority opinion among Jews today, we've been talking about the Temple Mount. There are more evangelical preachers in the world today who believe that the Jews have the right to the Temple Mount than there are Reform rabbis. That is the sad and sick reality.
We took up an amazing pastor from New York, Movement Church New York. For those of you in New York, Pastor Michael Doyle, he came out with us the other day, and he was incredibly moved. In a few months' time, we're going to be taking up a couple of Christian groups with Todd Moorhead and Justin Cron, the filmmakers behind Hope in the Holy Land. I get more calls from Christians daily, about taking them up there and being our allies in the fight. And that quote from Rav Kahana of blessed memory is so important, because I'm exhausted. I can tell you, I am so exhausted. For those of you listening tonight, you may hear my voice is a bit deeper. It's a little cracky. I'm getting over my third bout of corona. Unfortunately, I didn't realize I had corona, and I was still on the Temple Mount every single day last week. And they actually sent me home. The police and the rabbis were like, "You need to go home. You don't look well." And they literally would send me home from the Temple Mount. I'm exhausted. I am tired, but we need to get up every single day and fight. I don't care how tired you are. I don't care how exhausted you are. Rav Kahana fought until the end, and we need to carry on that legacy and fight with him. Whatever you may think of certain things that he has said and done, what we can say is Rav Kahana was right, is that God favors those who favor him, and we need to favor ourselves now to win this fight. And the only way that we're going to do that is to invest in the future of Israel, where we have a political class that believes that we are a Jewish state. That does not mean that we're not a democratic state, but we are first a Jewish state. And we all know that democracy is an extension of Judaism. We say that in America, that we're founded on Judeo-Christian values. Democracy is the political outcome, the modern political outcome of Judaism. And so the more and more we need to invest in a Jewish state, and we will succeed, no matter how tired and corona-ish we are.
Thank you for that. The clock dictates that I bid you farewell in a minute or so. Thank you so much.
Yes.
As I've always said, it's the fastest hour of the week. Hang loose. Dr. Melissa Jane Kronfeld from Israel, just a wonderful guest, and for the second time, and hopefully not for the last time, she'll be with us. Next Sunday, June 19th, Attorney William Wilford will interview Ken Abramowitz, an hour-long discussion of current events in both the United States and Israel, and examine the challenges of both governments and where they might intersect. It's an interview you don't want to miss. It was Soren Kierkegaard, the philosopher, who once stated, there are two ways to be fooled. One is to believe what isn't true, and the other is to refuse to believe what is true. Today there exists no arena that is more the subject of distortion of truth, of course, in the Middle East. It's for that reason that we remain relentless in our advocacy of Israel. Wise words from Kahana, from Kierkegaard, and from our guest today, Dr. Kronfeld. Saul Bellow, in his book, Jerusalem and Back, wrote the following: a great deal of intelligence can be invested in ignorance when the need for illusion is deep. As we end every show, we always tell people, the only people mad at you for speaking the truth are those living a lie. Keep speaking the truth. This is Meir Jolovitz signing off, reminding you that William Wolfe will be back with you next Sunday.